Hey everybody, Raynor here, welcome back. Continuing from my last video where I said I was going to come back and talk about the prestige levels that are being added into co-op in version 5 of StarCraft 2. And I'd like to thank The Chosen One for putting together this album. I had a text file of all of these, but this is a lot nicer with the screenshots. So we're going to start from the top, and we're going to just talk through what I think are the advantages and disadvantages, both literally on the screen, but also what I would take from these as a player. Now, I'm obviously not a professional co-op player, if there is such a thing, but I do play a lot of the mode, and I will have my opinions on these, even if they may not be the most optimal of choices. But in any case, I have a lot of fun with the mode, so let's get started. So we're starting with Raynor. Biological combat units gain 100% increased life, but mules are unavailable. That's definitely an interesting trade-off, because you definitely think that the meta for Raynor is to build just mass amounts of infantry, and with like 5 or 6 orbital commands to just dump mules. I do find, though, that after you get like your 3rd or 4th orbital command with the mules, that you start having more money than you can even spend, though it depends on the enemy composition that you're up against. And I guess I should preface all of this by saying what I like about this is, again, it gives you an advantage in a specific playstyle, and in a way that will make certain commanders way more viable for mutations. Like, there are certain commanders now, like Tychus is strong in almost every mutation. There are some that directly counter him, but for the most part, Tychus is always strong. Stukov is usually pretty strong. Mengsk is usually pretty strong. Hero, only Kerrigan, usually pretty strong. Right, so there's like top tiers of commanders that work for most mutations. Now, obviously not all of them, but most of them. That Zagara is usually a pretty good one too. The difference here now, though, is like certain commanders might have such a strong advantage in the face of certain mutators that this will make other commanders a lot more viable. Even though they might not still be considered like super top tier, it'll make them viable to the point where if you want to try to use Raynor Bio against a mutator, you can, when otherwise you might have just been like, I'll just do Tychus and it'll be fine. You know, so that's what I really like about the possibilities here. And there is the option to play without any of the prestige talents either, even if you've earned them. Alright, so that's our first one for Raynor. Afterburners additionally increase attack speed by 100%, cooldowns reduced by 50%. Units no longer cost less. Afterburner movement speed bonus reduced by 50%. I struggle to see the bonus here. Afterburners, it's mostly Raynor Air. I guess this could be good for like mass vultures, right? Your vultures can move very quickly around the map, and then it says cooldown reduced by 50%. Perhaps that will mean that your spider mines can rebuild twice as fast. Maybe. I don't know if that's the right way to interpret that, but I'm not sure what other cooldowns. I mean, Tactical Jump is the only other cooldown in Yamato. So this would be like a mass battle cruisers build, I would imagine. So if that doesn't count towards spider mines, the only cooldown that Raynor, I think, has for any of his units... Oh, this is cooldown of Afterburners. I take that back. Not just cooldowns in general. So yeah, this is interesting, because the fact that your units don't cost less anymore... I don't know, it gives you like a massive, it's kind of like Stimpack in a way, like increases attack speed massively. It's like Stimpack for your mechanical units, I suppose, is how you're supposed to view this. And it doesn't cost health to use either. Yeah, the more I think about this, the more this is very interesting to me. You probably couldn't really even afford to mix in bio units, but if you do mass mule drops, you could just do like tons of vultures, even like banshees with 100% attack speed buff could actually be really good. So I'm starting to think more on this and realize that this is actually better than my initial thought, and I like this quite a bit. Because you could do like a mass air composition, and this would work really well. Though, again, the units not costing less means you're probably not going to be able to get like a barracks bio ball of meat to support your mech, so you really have to be careful with what you have. Raynor Rough Rider. The starport no longer has tech requirements or a gas cost, and its units cost 30% less gas. Vikings, Banshees, and Battlecruisers increase top bar cooldowns rates by 1% when used. Increase top bar cooldown rates. So this is actually, I feel, is this not a disadvantage? Increase top bar cooldown rates? Oh, increases the rate. So I guess it's just faster Hyperion, not slower Hyperion. Combat units cost 50% more minerals, not gas. And so frankly, like, as long as you can get a couple Banshees out early, which will be expensive, once you get your typical, 4 to 5 orbital commands out, I see this as possibly the strongest option, simply because the disadvantage can be entirely negated based on what I said earlier. Well, what I like is these all support different play styles, right? Like, heavy mech, This is all. I mean, this is also mech, but from a different perspective, I suppose. And then bio. I don't know. I like this quite a bit. This is very neat, and that's just the first commander. All right, on to Kerrigan. Kerrigan expends stacks of fury while using Leaping Strike or Sonic Shift, striking nearby enemies for 50 damage and stunning them for 3 seconds. So she gets like an AoE added to her abilities. Carapace generation reduced by 50%, ability damage reduced by 50%. So the upfront damage is reduced by 50%, but it does a lot of AoE. The challenging thing here is you don't know what enemy composition you're going to get from the get-go. So, like, I might take this against, like, you know, Baneling, Zergling enemy comp, but you don't know that that's what you're going to get before. This is very interesting, though. So it's basically striking nearby enemy units. So this is, like, increasing the AoE of Psionic Shift. So you're just doing, like, even more damage to everything around here, but less to the initial cone. That's interesting. I'd have to think about that. Increases resource drops by 100%. And you gain Kinetic Blast and Crushing Grip. That's cool that they're bringing in the other Kerrigan abilities. Leaping Strike and Psionic Shift are unavailable. I really don't see this as a negative at all, because Kinetic Blast and Crushing Grip are quite good. I mean, I think these cost more energy than Leaping Strike and Sonic Shift, but I see this as like just a straight-up bonus. Like, these trade out almost... I think, especially if you look at it from the campaign perspective, Kinetic Blast and Leaping Strike trade out, Crushing Strike and Sonic Shift trade out, and then on top of that, you get the Assimilation or a bonus. I feel like this is a no-brainer in the sense of its very mild disadvantage, which I think when people are looking through these, they're going to look at what is the least disadvantageous to them. And that depends on your playstyle, but some I feel like are just outright less of a disadvantage, even if the advantage is slightly less than some of the other categories, if that makes sense. Increases the effectiveness of all active combat unit abilities by 100%. Combat units cost 30% more. The problem with Kerrigan's army, and they added a mastery for this to reduce the Vespene gas cost of upgrades and combat units, is it's just her combat units are expensive. Now, of all active combat unit abilities, what are those? What does Kerrigan have? Her air units don't have anything active as far as I know. Lurkers don't have anything active. I guess Frenzy? With this, if this affects Frenzy, that actually is extremely strong, now that I'm thinking about it, and Ultralisk Burrow Charge. So, Frenzy is technically an active ability, it's just on autocast. So if this means that Hydralisks will shoot 4 times as fast instead of twice as fast, this is insanely good, though obviously they cost more, and that's always been a struggle that Kerrigan deals with. So this is basically Ultra Hydra, without a doubt. You don't build anything else, you just build Ultra Hydra to support Kerrigan. That's interesting. I like that. I noticed there's really nothing in here that would... I mean, her Mutalisks are already really good, so I don't think she needed something that focused on her air units. Alright, on to Artanis. Upon use, Project Power Field warps out any of your combat units standing in an existing power field. Projection into the new... Oh, so it, like, warps them. And cooldown's removed. It adds an energy cost, so basically, you know, don't bother using much in terms of Orbital Strike or, not Guardian Shell, Shield Overcharge, because it costs energy to move them. But what's interesting here is, again, you use this just as a straight-up teleport, but it costs energy just to move it, even if you're not teleporting things. So that's something to keep in mind, because as Artanis, I move my power field all the time. But now that it costs energy, you pretty much only want to use it when you're trying to teleport things, I think. But that's interesting. Again, the disadvantage is relatively minimal for the advantage, in my opinion, and it doesn't really affect any other way that Artanis plays. It just gives you way more mobility, which is something Artanis lacks. Orbital Strikes warp in an Unbound Fanatic that throws off damaging energy and lasts 15 seconds. Shield Overcharge is now targeted, has its cooldown reduced by 50% and costs less energy. I don't know how to feel about this. We'd have to just see how this actually works in-game. Throws off damaging energy. I guess maybe it's just like it spawns what is essentially a Psionic Storm, right? It will do it'll spawn a unit that effectively Psionic Storms around itself, is what I'm guessing, but I can't be sure. The Shield Overcharge being targeted is really interesting, because the bonus of Shield Overcharge is the fact that you can use it, and it covers everything. Like, literally everything. Though, with its cooldown reduced, maybe you can use it in a more specific fashion. Orbital Strike costs 50 energy, and Guardian Shell is disabled. No. On to the next one. No thank you, sir. Well, I don't know, with the shield overcharge being targeted, I feel like they need to reduce the cooldown by more. Like, a lot more, to be honest. I think they need to make it so that you can actually use this in relatively quick succession to make up for the fact that there's no Guardian Shell. I think that would make that a lot... Well, but, I mean, the Unbound Fanatic might be really strong. I really don't know. I really don't know. All right, on to Swann. The Laser Drill deals splash damage and slows. The Laser Drill's abilities are unavailable. To be honest, I mean, you have to pay a lot of money to upgrade the Laser Drill, and you don't... I feel like by the time you get the third Laser Drill ability, it's really not needed. Like, it's very good, don't get me wrong, but I feel like by the time you get it, it's not super necessary, especially if you just... I mean, I don't know. I actually kind of like the sound of this. It's just sort of a fire and forget type mode. Turret upgrades are 100% more effective. Obviously going to be great on holdout missions. Combat units cost 50% more Vespene gas. Swann, I feel like unless you're going heavy science vessels, typically doesn't have a huge issue with gas because he's got the drones. So this would be great, obviously, on Dead of Night, Temple of the Past. Because on missions like that, you're typically only going to be building limited combat units to go and snipe certain things. Hercules has twice the cargo capacity and unloads units instantly. Tactical jump cooldown reduced by 50%. Top bar cooldowns increased by 100%, but they're not gone. I like the sound of this if you're very active with Hercules. I very rarely build Hercules with Swann, but I know that just moving tanks around the map would be really powerful. Though I just don't see myself using that one myself, but I know that it's a very strong strategy with Swann. Max supply increased by 50. Zerglings and Scourge spawn... this is wrong. We're moving on to... The labels are below. My bad. Now we're moving on to Zagara. Max supply increased by 50. Zerglings and Scourge spawn 1 extra unit per egg. Baneling nests spawn... Whoa, double Banelings, and Scourge nests spawn free Scourge. Zagara is unavailable. This is awesome. I mean, you lose Roach Drop, you lose Frenzy. You can just dump all your mastery points into the other option, right? You don't, any mastery points you have in Frenzy, you put in the other thing. This actually I love the sound of this, to be honest. Like, you'll miss those Hunter Killers, but just get to Scourge quickly, you'll be all good. This is just, macro like crazy. Aberrations and Corruptors cost 25% less, gain 50% increased health, and possess greatly increased health regen. No free Banelings. I think this is a reasonable trade-off. I mean, the free Banelings in the grand scheme probably will actually cost you more. Like, the opportunity cost I don't think is quite equal. Like, Aberrations costing 25% less. I don't know. Someone would have to do the analysis to see, like, well, how many Banelings would I have gotten for free? What would the cost of those have been? Banelings are relatively cheap, but over the period of an entire game, if you're getting like 100 Banelings, that's going to be quite significant compared to the amount of aberrations you need to make. And the fact that they have extra health and increased health regeneration means that you're going to probably have to build less of them throughout the course of the game because they're beefier, which means that you're actually having to spend even less money. But I guess you could use that extra money to just build your own Banelings. So that's kind of an interesting... I mean, if you have the wherewithal to build your own Banelings and not just rely on the free ones, this is a very good choice. Zagara gains reduced ability cooldowns, increased health and energy regeneration, and Deep Tunnel. That would be really nice. Yeah, one thing Zagara tends to lack is some mobility. Obviously, you can spam out Zerglings, but to get across the map very quickly is something she lacks unless you have Roach Drop up. Mass Frenzy only affects Zagara and her summoned units. Combat units cost 25% more. It depends. There's some games, especially if you're using her on a mutation, I find myself usually low on resources. But on a normal co-op match, I never have an issue with resources with Zagara. I think of all three, this is my least favorite one, to be honest. On to Vorazun. Emergency Recall recalls cloaked units to the closest nexus or dark pylon instead of the primary structure, and heals life and shields to full. Deploy Dark Pylon cooldown and cost reduced by 50%, but you can't recall with them. I typically don't use recall. I feel like I've gotten to the point where I play enough co-op where, like, a lot of these active usage abilities I realize I don't ever need to use, even if it would be optimal to do so. So now I see this where I'm like, oh, you lose an active ability on your Dark Pylon. I've used Dark Pylon in a pinch, but, very rarely do you absolutely need it. So this is a pretty good advantage, and you can just be deploying Dark Pylons all throughout the map because it's going to be a lot cheaper to call them down. Now, obviously, that's going to be competing, even though it's going to be cheaper to use, it's competing always with Black Hole in terms of energy cost, so there's that. But this is kind of cool that you get full life and shields on the emergency recall instead of just, you know, just shields. Enemy units affected by Void Stasis, Confusion Stasis, Ward, Disruption Web, or Dark Coil lose 20 life per second? This effect cannot kill, but still. Combat units deal 50% reduced damage. Stasis Ward duration reduced by 75%. This is another one where, like, you'd have to be really active with Oracles and Dark Archons if you want this to work. But, like, even just... If you do your typical DT Corsair, and then you mix in some... What are they called? Sentinels of the Purifier ones. Why can I not think of what they're called? The Nerazim Zealots. It's going to pop into my head in like 5 seconds. But anyway, you mix some of those in there. I mean, the question, it says 50% reduced damage. Does that affect Shadow Fury? Because if not, then this is extremely strong, I think, in retrospect. You're going to struggle, I think, against air units, like air compositions. But against ground, this would be really, really good. The thing is, you can't know but when you queue up. Time Stop becomes targeted. All Shadow Guard who have died are resurrected at the target location. Shadow Guard duration reduced by 40%. You know, I'm realizing if we cycle back up to Artanis, when it says targeted, I don't think it means individual unit targeted. I think it means, like, in an area. Like, only in a small area. So it really is going to depend on how big that area is, because you don't necessarily need to time stop the whole map. You don't necessarily need to shield overcharge all of your units and allied units. You just need it on, like, the area that's taking heat. So in retrospect, even the Artanis one, if I were to scroll back up to it, I feel is... this actually is a lot better than I originally thought. Because, again, typically you only need to use it in a specific way, in a specific location. And that's going to be the same here. All Shadow Guard who have died are resurrected at the target location. So when it says have died, I'm not sure... I guess what you do is you'd want to call in the Shadow Guard, let them die, and then time stop? Does it mean, like, over the course of the map, if I've summoned 12, 16, 20 Shadow Guard, and then make sure that they all die rather than get warped out, they just get resurrected? Or, again, this would need some clarification in-game to see exactly how this would work. But this is interesting. And then the duration of the Shadow Guard is reduced by 40%, but you can just get them resurrected. Which I guess would spawn them back still on timed life. I'm not 100% sure. Again, this one would need elucidated. Alright, on to Karax. Repair Beam is 100% more effective and can target twice as many structures. How long have we been going for? 18 minutes? And we're like a third through? Alright. Repair Beam is 100% more effective and can target twice as many structures. Unity Barrier affects defensive structures, and its cooldown is reduced by 75%. Chrono Boost, Chrono Wave, and Chrono Field affect defensive structures, increasing their rate of attack. Wow. Repair Beam may only target structures. Unity Barrier no longer affects units. Obviously, super defensive Karax. Super defensive Karax. And the thing is, when you're going defensive Karax, you very rarely even need to build an army, and you can just focus on Spear of Adun anyway to support your ally. Again, this is just very focused on... I can't really say... It just depends on the circumstance. Like, on super defensive mutations, this would be fantastic. Just like the Swann one with the turret upgrades. Combat unit cost reduced by 40%! It's back! It's back, baby! Army Karax, Photon Cannons, and Kadeon Monoliths, get the fuck out of here. All of you defensive Karax cowards, get out of here. You go Army Karax or bust. When they reduced this mastery, I was so sad. But now, not only would the combat units be beefier because of the mastery, they would be 40% cheaper. This is, oh my gosh, Karax is now once again one of my favorite commanders. I've missed you, Karax. After they removed that mastery, I hated you. But now, I love you again. Top tier Karax. Okay. This is top tier Jaberino right here. Orbital Strike and Solar Lance energy cost reduced by 40%. Solar Lance and Purifier Beam cooldowns reduced by 50%. But none of the Chrono abilities. That's a big downside. Like, yes, now the Solar Lance energy cost and an Orbital Strike energy cost reduction is nice, but Chrono Wave and Chrono Boost increase the rate at which you get solar energy, so I wonder how, in the long run, how that would balance out. I still think overall you're going to have, a positive trend on solar energy over the course of the whole game, but still, this sort of tempers the cost reduction. I don't know how I feel about this. I do typically like to go Army Karax supplemented by Spear of Adun, which is why I would definitely err on the side of Templar Apparent as compared to Solarite Celestial. Alright, on to Abathur. Combat units can hold an additional 25 biomass and have an additional 50% chance to drop their biomass upon death. But no more No. No. I feel like I rely way too much on Brutalisks. Like, I feel like Abathur... Well, I guess the whole point is you can play him different ways. The way I play him, which is why I would never take Essence Hoarder, is I always rush out to my first 3 Brutalisks and Leviathans as fast as possible. Like, you just, spam... You just mineral dump Roaches and Queens to support it, but I always just focus on getting those ultimate evolutions out. But what this does is, I would use this at some point to basically give myself an incentive to play him a different way. So there's that. Locusts have 50% increased attack range, movement speed, and duration. Deep Tunnel upgrade no longer requires Hive, no longer requires Vision, and can be used by Roaches and Ravagers? Huh. I didn't know Deep Tunnel required Hive in the first place, first of all. Is this a Swarm Host? His Swarm Host can do that? I honestly, because I rarely build them. This is cool. So this is like Swarm Host. This is like very swarmy Abathur build. Combat units are more Vespene gas. I mean, if you're not making air, if you just commit to not making air with Abathur, I feel like the 25% more Vespene gas is entirely acceptable, because most of your gas in that case is going towards Swarm Hosts, and then some Ravagers. This is actually pretty cool. I like this a lot. This, I would say, is like the most neutral in terms of, disadvantages. Oh, I haven't read the last one, though. The number of ultimate evolutions is no longer limited to 3, but it takes double the amount of biomass. I do think Abathur is very reliant. I think Abathur is a little too reliant on getting an early Brutalisk. But again, that's just the way I play him. One of the other ones is you can't get any ultimate evolution, so I think I'm just biased in that sense. I just think Abathur is super powerful simply because he can get the early Brutalisks. So this one would be interesting to try, just because having just tons of Brutalisks and Leviathans, and biomass being less powerful, meaning your units are going to be more vulnerable while you're trying to get them into that ultimate evolution point state. All right, hang on. I gotta pause the video. There's a bug. I have to go and kill it, and then we'll continue with Alarak. All right, I'm happy to report that we're all safe here. Moving on. On to Alarak. No title on this one. I'm sure there's a title, but that's fine. When a supplicant dies, it increases the damage and attack speed of one of Alarak's nearby non-heroic mechanical combat units. The only non-mechanical units that Alarak has is Alarak, but he's heroic, other supplicants, or ascendants. This is strange to me. I'm not sure. Again, this might be something I would need to see in action. Because I think it's basically saying ascendants, but if it goes to other supplicants, that seems kind of silly to me. At the cost of 50% reduced destruction wave and deadly charge damage. So this is also going to reduce Empower Me's advantages as well. I don't know how I feel about this. This is one where I feel like we'd have to see it in action to fully understand how good it could be. All right, Tyrant Ascendant. Empower Me cooldown reduced by 50%, but no Death Fleet. And you could juggle your masteries to just remove any advantage you're giving to the Death Fleet to Empower Me for an even better cooldown on it. This would actually be, I think, really strong. I don't think the Death Fleet is that good. I mean, the Mothership is good with the beam, but honestly, Empower Me is probably better. I think this is excellent. I would probably take this one, though let's check the last one. The Death Fleet has no duration. The damage dealt and vitals are reduced by 50%. Summon Death Fleet cooldown increased by 100%. Mass Teleport now has a 60-second cooldown and no longer teleports allied units. See, the nice thing about this one is it's not about the fact that the Death Fleet is out. It's really all about the Mothership and Mass Teleport, because what Alarak has lacked in the past is mobility. And having the Mothership out 100% of the time, assuming it doesn't die, is you can teleport anywhere around the map. You can't bring your allied stuff, but that's fine. This basically just gives you like a Griffin transport ability like Nova has, or a medevac transport like Tychus has without the healing, of course. So this one is basically, this gives Alarak a ton of mobility. This gives Alarak a big focus on Alarak specifically, and this gives Alarak, I would say, like an Ascendant build, big bonus. But I think, again, I would consider this one like the most neutral in terms of the disadvantages, because I don't think the Mothership and the Death Fleet call down in general is really that good, if it were up to me. Like, in terms of relative to the rest of Alarak's top bar abilities, I think that Death Fleet is probably the least important one, in my opinion. And I would consider Empower Me like a top bar ability. It's like an ultimate ability. Okay, on to Nova. Barracks unit charges accrue 100% faster. Starport and factory unit charges accrue 50% slower. This is pretty straightforward. I like masked ghosts with Nova if you can afford them, so this is pretty neat. I feel like anything involving gas cost for Nova would be something I'd go for if it exists. Tactical airlift cooldown reduced by 75%, but no Griffin airstrike. I feel like you would need a mineral dump into something if you didn't have Griffin airstrike. Like, Griffin airstrike, it's not about the fact that it's a super good ability. It is, but it's definitely not necessary in terms of needing it to beat a map. It's just at a certain point as Nova, you have so many minerals, and it's typically being just short on gas, and you just can't, you're just supply capped. So I don't know if I would ever take this, if only because I feel like it's wasteful of the resource accumulation you tend to have as Nova. Nova gains permanent super cloak. Her abilities have 50% increased radius and a 50% reduced cooldown. I don't know what super cloak means. Or maybe super cloak is reflective of this. So her abilities have 50% increased radius, 50% reduced cooldown. So when it says increased radius, I'm going to guess that means the nuke. So having 50% reduced cooldown on the nuke and on the drone, the explosive, I don't know what it's called, but the drone that explodes. And you can't go to combat suit, so no shotgun, so no hollow decoy, and no blink. It depends on what you're facing. It depends on what comp you're facing, because that could really screw you early if you can't use the shotgun on like a big Zergling wave or a Terran Bio wave. And when you attack or use snipe, you lose super cloak. That's very interesting, and I don't really understand what Super Cloak is. Maybe Super Cloak is like, you literally can't be seen by anything, including detection? I don't know. I don't really know what that means. Maybe it means that you attack faster. I'm not 100% sure, but I guess it's not important. It's one of those interesting things where I think you would actually put her on, you would leave Nova on Hold Fire, which is something you pretty much never do. So this actually gives you a reason to try to be stealthy with Nova. Infiltration Specialist, exactly. So you actually get out there and use that drone, that explosive drone, to actually just chip away at the enemy constantly. So this is very hero-focused. This, I would just nix this outright. And I don't know, I honestly think I would probably take Infiltration Specialist at the end of the day. I honestly don't really like any of these, if I was being 100% honest. Okay, let's go on to Stukov. Factory and Starport no longer have tech requirements. Mechanical units cost 30% less, but no infested colonist compound. That's cool. Okay, so I think some of these, again, like Novas, these are all like meh advantage, meh disadvantage. Whereas like this is like super strong advantage, but very noticeable disadvantage as well. And those I think are the ones that I prefer. I would rather have a much bigger advantage in one aspect and a much bigger disadvantage in another, rather than like a wishy-washy neutral. I think it's worth pointing out the neutral ones, because I think a lot of people will prefer the ones that least affect their playstyle, at which point you might as well just play with none of the prestige talents, if that's how you kind of feel about it. I think the whole point is you go all in on one thing, and you just have a blast with it. And that's, I think, what this is, which is like, fuck the infested colonist compound. You know, you can still make bunkers, so you can spawn infested marines. Infested marines are cheaper now. That's just the thing for Stukov across the board. So you can just actually make barracks and spam those out. But the key is the gas cost of your mechanical units is going to be a lot lower. So you actually can do like a Diamondback Banshee Liberator build, and it would be totally viable. Instead of dumping all those minerals and gas into upgrading your infested upgrades at the colonist compound. and it's your engineering base. I quite like this. Again, if you want to play a Stukov mech build, which a lot of people don't, but I love going Stukov mech. I like going Stukov air. It's not optimal, but it's fun. So this would actually be a really cool idea. I wish that this just said factory and starport units cost 30% less, because this won't apply to queens. I wish they should just make it so that it's just the units built out of these as opposed to mechanical per se. I don't know if maybe that would count towards bunkers, though. Like, bunkers are technically units, but they're built as buildings. But in another mode there, I don't know. I doubt it. I bet this doesn't count towards bunkers. But I guess in one way, if you do some mental gymnastics, it does. I'm going to guess, though, in-game, that won't reduce the 400 mineral cost down. Okay, Plague Warden. Banshees can load up to 16 infested infantry and can launch their cargo at ground targets. Infested civilians have 30% reduced time life. I'm gonna mark this one as something I would definitely do, if only because it sounds hilarious and silly. And frankly, the disadvantage doesn't seem like that big of a deal to me. Especially because you can offset it with one of your masteries. I don't even know how to feel about it. I'd have to see how good this ability actually is. Can launch their cargo at a ground target. I guess I don't fully understand the point. I guess maybe you load up a volatile infested and shoot them. Or maybe, like, even if it's a normal infested infantry, when it says can launch their cargo, it's dealing damage when it does that. Like a flying infested siege tank, maybe? That's how I'm going to interpret this, but I really can't be sure. Another one we'd have to see in action, but it sounds funny, so I like it. Lord of the Horde. Infested bunkers spawn infested troopers 200% faster, but no longer have cargo capacity. So what I tend to do with Stukov is, like, if I'm not going to go straight mech, and I like to do a mix, I will just build a ton of extra bunkers for those free infested marines. So this just supports Stukov play in that sense, as long as you're not on a defensive map where you actually need the bunkers defensively. A lot of the times people tend to build his bunkers and then just unload the troopers anyway when they're ready to attack. So this kind of supports that play style in a more... to provide a little more longevity. So rather than waiting for the troopers to spawn inside the bunkers, it just spawns them outright, and they're just flowing out as part of your typical... I think this would be like the neutral Stukov prestige talent, in the sense that the downside really only matters if you have to play defensively, which is, you know, only on like 2 maps out of the rotation. Okay. On to Fenix. All armor suit damage increased by 100%. Ability cooldowns reduced by 50%. Life shield and energy regeneration increased by 100% while in storage. All armor suit cooldowns increased 7 times. Each suit can only be sustained for 20 seconds at a time. So I think this is just, it's very, I mean, I wouldn't even say this is necessarily hero-focused, but more about using your hero at specific times as opposed to just him always being there. And frankly, I kind of like this, because as Stukov, or not Stukov, as Fenix, I tend to focus on getting all my demi-heroes out. So I kind of like the idea of just like bringing in Fenix when you are actually pushing somewhere, because you don't really need him all the time. As long as the initial armor suit cooldown isn't 700% more at the beginning of the match. As long as you can get Fenix out at the beginning to deal with the first attack, and it's not, you know, times 7 right there at the very start, I kind of like this. This is interesting, but just the way that, like, I think Fenix at a certain point, like, becomes way less important in his army composition as you play through. Like, once you get, like, 10 to 15 minutes into any co-op map, the map is either over or you're far enough into it that you don't really need, like, Fenix is not that important in your group. So I kind of like the idea of this, if you're willing to actually think about when you're going to drop him in. Network Administrator. Tactical... Also, what is this? I don't know. That's probably a reference to something I don't understand. Subsaurian, please, I need your help. Network Administrator. Tactical data web effectiveness increased by 200%. All combat unit costs reduced by 50%. All non-heroic combat unit Oh. So the tactical data web is... It makes your demi-heroes stronger based on the number of units around them. So, like, I don't know exactly what the amounts are, but, like, the more adepts you have, the stronger Talus will be. The more scouts you have, the stronger Mojo will be. And this is increasing that by 200%. That's huge. And the fact that your combat units are cheaper, so you can replace them quite easily. I like this, because this reinforces my playstyle with Fenix. which is, I mean, so does this. These both would, but this more so. Because I really like focusing on the demi-heroes as Fenix, and I tend to not just, like, rush to carriers or rush to one unit type. I like to build a little bit of everything to maximize tactical data web and get all my demi-heroes out. And then, of course, Probius. So this would benefit my playstyle with Fenix, I think, quite a lot. Unwavering Vindicator. Avenging Protocol effectiveness increased by 100%. Champion AIs that die refund 75% of their base unit cost. So Avenging Protocol is when your demi-hero dies and their personality gets transferred into another unit of the same type. I think they get like a combat bonus for a period of time. So this increases that by 100%. And when your champion AIs die, you get their money. You get most of the money back. The disadvantage, champion AIs do not gain additional life or shields and have reduced attack range. So when it says additional life or shields, does that mean from the tactical data web or just in general? Because it can't be in general, because, like, what's the point? Well, I don't know. I was going to say, what's the point of having a champion AI? What's the point of having a demi-hero if you can't... If it doesn't have those extra stats? I guess the point is they don't have more survivability. They still do the extra damage. They still get their abilities. But they have reduced attack range, which means they're going to be in the front. They're going to be dying. And the whole point is they die, and then Avenging Protocol dumps them into another unit. And you get a lot of the money back, so you can rebuild them quite quickly. So the idea is you actually want to be cycling through your units very quickly. This is a very interesting one. This is one where, like, I would never utilize this playstyle unless I was kind of incentivized and forced into it, and that's exactly what this would do. This is one I really couldn't comment on. I don't like the sound of it, but I think it would be fun to try, for sure. I definitely see why it would be advantageous. Okay, Dehaka. Devour applies its benefits to all nearby friendly units. Dehaka has 0 base armor, loses the Scorching Breath ability, and your max level, I guess you're capped at 11. I mean, the advantage, I think, that's really strong. I don't... Especially, like, the psionic units. You eat a psionic unit, and every single one of your units also explodes and kills everything around them. That's... I don't know. I don't know. Like, I want to say it's really good, but it's like you have to picture all the different combinations. This is cool. This is just a cool one. Again, it's similar to, like, this. It's similar to Unwavering Vindicator. It's like, I would never do this on purpose unless, you know, I was sort of incentivized into it. And this is, I mean, that's kind of the point, I suppose. All right, pack leaders and their entourage deal 50% more damage and have 100% increased life. Pack leader cooldowns reduced by 33%. Pack leaders can consume essence for Dehaka. Dehaka exits the map while a pack leader is active. Only one pack leader may be active at a time. This, you know, I could get into this. I think this is neat. The fact that they do a lot more damage and have more life. The thing with Dehaka is he's just such a powerhouse. Like, I'm trying to envision, like, I could play a map with, like, only Dehaka and never use a single pack leader, but I would never play a map using only pack leaders but not Dehaka, if that makes sense. I guess I could, again, the whole point is this incentivizes you to try something new and different and weird, and gives you a reason to do it, and gives you advantages to actually make it a fairly balanced and fun experience. This is neat. I would definitely want to try this. It's hard for me to say it would be, like, my favorite. Of all three of these... Oh, wait, we've only been through 2. Dehaka spawns a clone. If either Dehaka or the clone dies, the other one dies as well, and their max health is reduced by 35%. That's going to be real fun. That's going to... This one would be really fun. That's all I can say. It's probably going to be hard at the beginning of each match, but this one would be really, really fun. All right. On to H&H. Chaotic Power Couple. Magmine's Arm and Fire 80% faster. Mira's units' on-death effects are 100% more effective. Horner's units cost 30% more. I think this is great. I actually quite like this one a lot, because Horner's units are already effective, and frankly... especially with the fact that they've made the Galleons so that they can passively heal once you get the Hanger upgrades. I feel like the H&H combo is mostly just Han anyway. And then Horner units, you get like a couple Ravens, and then, you get some BCs at the end, but you don't really need them. I guess that's how I view Horner units in this combination anyway. Like, the Horner units are fluff. They're cool, and they're fun to mix in for some diversity, but not necessary. Granted, this will mess with the, they're level 15, where like Horner units buff Han units and Han units buff Horner units, right? You do need that mix in order to just increase your overall army effectiveness. So this would mess with that to a degree. But you can use Magmines a lot more offensively. I think this is cool. All right, Wing Commander. Horner's units Vespene gas cost reduced by 20%. Charge cooldowns reduced by 50%. Galleons are kept at 2. I quite like this one as well. I've liked both of these H&H ones. It's funny because some commanders, I look at all three and I'm like, I want to try all of these. And then some other commanders, I'm like, there's only one of these that I give a shit about. And then some other ones, I'm like, this one's real weird and therefore I want to try it. And this is one where so far I've liked both. And we'll check the third one. I don't really have many more comments on this one, but I like this. This is going to be detrimental at the beginning of the game, I feel like, of the match, but probably less impactful near the end when you have more Horner units. But as long as you're actually producing constantly out of your Galleons, I really don't think that the cap would be that big of a deal. Bombing platforms are no longer capped! Bombing platforms cost 100% more. I love this. I love this. This is one where it's just weird, and I would just love to play with like exclusively bombing platforms and some Galleons. That would be so fun. And then Ravens, of course, to give vision. Galactic Gun Runners. This is probably one of the goofiest ones so far, and I really like it. All right, Tychus, Technical Recruiter. Outlaw's active ability cooldowns reduced by 35%. The cost and time between outlaw recruitment increased by 50%. I don't really care about the time between, because frankly, I feel like most maps you can beat exclusively with Tychus and Kev Rattlesnake West. It's true. Like, if you just, you get out your early engineering bays and you just are perpetually upgrading plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, I feel like, and then you just get them each to their, 4/4 ultimate abilities, you really only need 2. If that's how you want to play. The fact that it costs more to get the heroes, though, I guess this is basically if you're playing with a low number of heroes, in my opinion. This is like you're focusing on like 2 or 3 heroes, and the reason that this would be good would be on non-mutations, I think, where you're just trying to get through maps quickly. You're going to be able to just absolutely blast through maps with just 2 Tychus heroes. With this one, because again, the ability cooldown reduction, even with just the grenade alone, would be really strong. You go Tychus, Cav Rattlesnake West, or maybe Nakara if you're a weirdo, and like Nux or Vega, and that would be enough to pretty much destroy any map. Who needs the last 2? Outlaws deal 200% more damage and take 50% less damage when beyond the vision range of all other outlaws. Ultimate gear is unavailable. Gear costs 25% more. This one is weird, because frankly, I feel like the disadvantages, like the fact that they need to be beyond the vision range of all other outlaws is its own disadvantage. Right? The advantage should be outlaws deal 200% more damage and take 50% less damage, and the disadvantage should be must be beyond the vision range of all other outlaws, right? The fact that there's also no ultimate gear, and there's also a gear cost increase, is really strange. Like, I can't imagine soloing with just Tychus, but this is one where it's like, you just get Tychus, and you just get probably, honestly, in this one, you would just get Nakara, and you leave Nakara on hold position, out on the middle of the map, and then you just move Tychus back and forth, or you just focus on Medivacs. This one's weird. I don't know how I feel about this. This is very strange. 50% less damage. I mean, again, this is like a Tychus solo. Interesting. The Odin no longer requires Tychus as its pilot. Its duration is increased by 100% and its cooldown is reduced by 40%, but it has no abilities. Big Red Button is super strong. I think it's the best, well, besides Mengsk's nukes, it's the best, like, area clear in terms of, like, top bar cooldown. It's basically like Solar Bombardment, but instant. You don't have to wait for the solar bombardment spread to take effect, right? It's mostly just the area effect of Big Red Button is incredible. But I found that, honestly, as Tychus, my playstyle with Tychus is I tend to build, like I said, maybe 3 heroes. Usually it's going to be Tychus, Kev, and then either Nux or Vega, and that's how I roll, and then I get up to plus 5/5. And then you can just bypass Big Red Button. I mean, it's obviously really good. It might not be, you know, it's not optimal to not get it, but you don't need it. And it's sort of like lazy, because then I'm just like, all right, just focus on getting the +5 and don't use my Engineering Bay Qs for anything else. So this kind of benefits that to a degree. And then you just call down the Odin and it just adds a ton of DPS, even though you can't use Big Red Button. I kind of like this one, and it's kind of like the neutral Tychus upgrade in my opinion, in the sense that the disadvantage isn't hugely impactful in my opinion, but that's only because I don't think the big red button is fluff. Like, it's really good, but never necessary to beat any particular map in my opinion. Alright, we've made it to the last one. We're on to Zeratul. Zeratul can deploy the Void Seeker, granting all friendly units in a target area Super Cloak. There's that Super Cloak again. I don't know what that means. For 15 seconds. Am I just supposed to interpret Super Cloak as essentially invulnerable? Like, I know it doesn't make them literally invulnerable, but I'm assuming it makes them untargetable. In the sense that, like, nothing can detect them. So you're essentially invulnerable unless something is doing splash damage to you. Also, Anaxun, once again, Subsurian, please, I need your help. The Void Seeker can no longer transport Zeratul. I do think that the Void Seeker transportation is a little too core to Zeratul in order to get the artifact pieces. This is it's going to be really good for pushing, but is it really necessary? Because, like, the whole idea is, like, Zeratul, you rush to get all 3 artifact pieces, and then you're so strong that you don't need any help to push into enemy bases, especially with your top-down call-downs, top-bar call-downs. This one I just don't really see as... I understand. I think the disadvantage is relatively equal to the advantage. It's just... I think that, not just for me, but for everybody, the core gameplay of Zeratul is too centered around the artifacts and getting them as fast as possible. Because the power spike you get from each one is too much. So not being able to get them fast by transporting Zeratul... but instead being able to, like, focus down the front of an enemy base by being virtually invulnerable just doesn't seem okay to me for Zeratul. I don't know. Knowledge Seeker. Zeratul can collect an unlimited number of artifact fragments. Zeratul's combat units cost more. I think that's acceptable, because Zeratul is one of those commanders that by the end of every map, I'm floating so much money, because you're capped at 100 supply. So this is going to hurt you early. Well, based on what I was just saying, again, the way I play Zeratul, at least, and the way that I think Zeratul is the strongest, besides cannons, of course, is to just go crazy with the artifact fragments. And in this case, you can combine it with the mastery to increase the rate at which the artifact fragments spawn. The thing is, once you get past 3, what do the artifact fragments benefit you? I assume it'll continue buffing Zeratul's stats. Will it add anything to his army, I wonder? But even if it doesn't, I feel like an extra 25% cost really is not going to be breaking the bank for Zeratul at the end of the day. Because the beginning of the maps, you tend to be relying on your top-down call-down to kill the rocks. And you tend to not have to rush units out unless it's maybe Rifts to Core Hall, where the first enemy attack spawns really early compared to the other maps. I don't know. I mean, I think I would prefer this one. Let's check the last one. Each collected artifact fragment reduces... Oh, there are more. Wait. We still have Stetmann. Zeratul, I figured we're at the Z's, so we were at the end, but there's more. Each collected because we've got Stetmann and Mengsk. Each collected artifact fragment reduces the cooldown of Zeratul's Shadow Cleave by 5 seconds. Is that the spin, where he spins? I think so. Shadow Cleave spawns a tornado that damages and slows enemy units. You can only collect 2... No. Can only collect 2 artifact fragments? Absolutely not. I feel like the way they designed these, and the way they designed Zeratul in general, is do you want to focus on collecting artifacts, or do you want to focus on building an army? And frankly, I feel like there's no competition between those two playstyles. It's like old Stukov bunkers versus old Stukov mech, and they had to balance it and make mech cheaper and make bunkers more expensive just because it was an obvious decision. For Zeratul, I feel like collecting artifact fragments is the obvious decision, and they haven't done anything to necessarily make it so that the artifact fragment power jumps are weaker, or rather make the army units stronger, specifically in the early parts of the maps, to make me ever think that I wouldn't want to rush to the artifact fragments. Alright, on to Stetmann. Stellalites are invulnerable once they're online. Stellalites generate 50% larger stat zones, but no Super Gary. I think pretty much everybody rushes to Super Gary as Stetmann because his abilities are a little too good. But The Steadites being invulnerable to provide constant vision, I think is pretty darn good. Especially on mutations. That's where I would also see a big bonus for this. In particular is on certain mutations. I could see this being a big bonus. I think the big downside with Super Gary not being available is you can't teleport your units, which is the mobility that you typically have as Stetmann, but not really, because you can just use the speed Steadilite config. So I don't really see the teleporting as not being an issue, but not having the ability to generate a Stet Zone when you're pushing it into an enemy base. So that's going to slow your push into enemy bases a little bit, even if you... I mean, on the other hand, as long as you're active and deploying your Steadilites, it really shouldn't be a problem, because you can get your Stet Zones pushed up as you're pushing to an enemy base. But it wouldn't be as easy, it wouldn't be as much of an easy flow as it would to just generate it from Super Gary. Yeah, I mean... I could take it or leave it. This one, I think a lot of people would say absolutely not because Super Gary is core to Stetmann. But I don't know. This one I could take or leave. I think it's fine. Gary's health and damage increased by 100%. That's gonna. I mean, that would benefit Super Gary a ton with the best oil. Gary's movement and speed is reduced by 90% outside of Stet Zones. I don't like this just because it's depending on the map. It's really hard to get Stet Zones up to where they need to be. Especially at the beginning of the map. I don't know. I'm usually pretty active with setting up Stet Zones, but that's one of the reasons why I don't care for Stetmann as much. Like, it's a little too much with the with setting up the Steadilites. Like, I don't know. It depends. Sometimes I enjoy it and I think it's fine. It's like spreading creep. But I think it's a little too much. Especially because Stetmann has so many units with interesting usable abilities, but most of my focus as Stetmann is way too focused on spreading Steadilites. And I understand that's kind of the point of his gameplay, but at the same time, his units all have usable, non-autocastable abilities that I want to be trying to use as well. So I think Stetmann, in terms of like actual mechanical skill required to play really well, like super well, like better than you would ever need to actually win any maps in co-op, is probably one of the highest of all the commanders, in my opinion. Oil Baron. Combat units gain a stack of the best oil when they kill an enemy unit. Combat units cost 40% more minerals. Mecha Infestors are unavailable. I don't know. I don't know. I feel like this would be really good for... Well, I don't know. Would this be good for Mecha Battle Carrier Lords? Because if a Broodling kills a unit, does it technically count as a kill for the Mecha Battle Carrier Lord? Because if so, this would be great. Because the mineral cost is really not the issue with the Mecha Battle Carrier Lords. It's the gas, in my opinion. I mean, it's expensive on both, but this would be, I think, really good for Mecha Battle Carrier Lords. But not much else. I guess Ultralisks. I mean, the whole point of this is you have an army with longevity to it. But another big part of Stetmann is his units are recycled. So, like, your Zerglings and Banelings and Hydralisks get recycled. So, I don't know. I don't think the advantage is quite good enough here, but I think it would be good for Ultras and Mecha Battle Carrier Lords. On to Mengsk. We're at 53 minutes. I think this is the last one. Contaminated Strike's fear lasts 200% longer. Its damage over time... Okay, this is basically them saying, please, use Contaminated Strike. We made this ability, and nobody uses it because the other top bar abilities are too good compared to Contaminated Strike. Its cost is reduced by 20%. Its cooldown is reduced by 66. Troopers provide Imperial support while operating Earth Splitter Ordnance. This is basically like Dead of Night. Use this when you're playing on Dead of Night. Nuclear Annihilation is unavailable. Interesting. We'll have to see if any other ones are good for Earth Splitter Ordnance, because this is just like, if you like playing with Earth Splitter Ordnance, which I definitely do, use this one. And frankly, Nuclear Annihilation, I mean, I feel like the Zerg cooldown is always better. I feel like the Zerg 100 Imperial Mandate cooldown is, I would say 9 times out of 10, the better option compared to Nuclear Annihilation, unless you're on Scythe of Amon, where the Nuclear Annihilation can actually kill Void Slivers. So, again, someone correct me if you disagree. Well, if you disagree with me, I don't have, like, the numbers, but I just think Nuclear Annihilation is cool, but it's very limited in the area that it hits. Like, it's overkill for a small area. versus the Zerg. So that's why I think this, I mean, even if you don't really use Contaminated Strike that much, this kind of incentivizes you to use more Earth Splitter Ordnance and Contaminated Strike, while also just using Zerg as your call down, primarily. Railguard Vespene cost reduced by 25%, XP gain increased by 100%. I don't really care about the XP gain. Railguard mineral cost increased by 100%. That's fine, because their mineral cost was never an issue. Supply cost increased by 50%. That is pretty significant. This would be really good for, like, mass Imperial Shadow. Is that what they call Imperial Shadow or something like that? Like, mass tactical nukes, basically. I think this would be really good for that. I don't think this would be good with, like, Thors or battle cruisers, because the supply, specifically around the supply, it's not really the mineral cost, but the supply cost of the battle cruisers is already so high that you're going to struggle to have, like, a fully fleshed out army, I feel like, if you start mixing those in. But this would be really good if you just massed up, like, low-tier Royal Guards. So, like, maybe tanks, Imperial Shadows, Aegis Guards would be really good. Again, the already low supply Royal Guard. So I could definitely see the bonus here. This, specifically, I think if you wanted to go mass tactical nukes, which is really fun. Again, it's probably not the most optimal build for Mengsk, but it's really fun. And if you haven't tried it, you really should, because it's a blast. Principal Proletariat. Equipped troopers activate a self-destruct mechanism in their weapons upon death. Trooper weapons cost 40 minerals and 20 gas. Actually, wait, isn't that cheaper? They're normally like 150 or something. Like, the weapons cost is typically way more minerals. Now it's minerals and gas instead. So that's kind of an interesting trade-off in and of itself. Troopers no longer drop weapons. Imperial Intercessors no longer available. I think that's a little too... The Intercessors are a little too core to Mengsk. I think that this is just... I wouldn't say this is viable, but though it really depends on how good the self-destruct mechanism is. Like, if they, like, dive bomb range, like, if it only works on melee enemies, I think it's... If they basically, like, explode, like, you know, like Han and Horner Widow Mines when they die, they launch, like, the little blast? If it was like that, this would be great. Even without the Intercessors, right? But I think, you know, my gut reaction is Intercessors are too good. The meta around Mengsk is always build the Intercessors quickly, and I think that's what everyone's going to say. But it really depends on how good the self-destruct is. And if it works like the Han and Horner Widow Mine death effect, then this would be so fun. I think this would be just hilarious to use. So I'll hold my judgment until we see. So at the end of the day, I'm really happy with Karax. I'm really happy with Stukov. I like some of these Mengsk ones. The Stetmann ones, I don't know how I feel. I'm kind of mixed both on Zeratul and Stetmann. Just gonna scroll up. Tychus, I would say there were one or two that I could definitely get into. H&H, I think I liked all of them. H&H, I liked all of them. Dehaka, Dehakas are all interesting. They all really have you play very differently. It's not even that it incentivizes a certain existing playstyle, it creates new playstyles. So I think that's cool. Fenix, kind of the same thing. Specifically with the event, well, I mean, actually all three. Similar to Dehaka, where Dehaka and Fenix specifically adds new playstyles as opposed to just buffing an existing one. Stukov, I think opposite. He buffs existing playstyles, except this one. This one, I don't know how to feel about Plague War, and that one's just weird, and we'll have to try it. But, you know, either focusing on Infested Marines or on Mech, I appreciate that, and I like that a lot. I'm not really thrilled with any of Nova's, to be honest. I guess if I were, you know, if I had to pick a favorite, it would be this last one. And then up to Alarax. This is another one where it's picking a specific playstyle and focusing on it as opposed to, like, adding a totally new type of playstyle. I like the idea of having the mothership 100% of the time. That way you can warp around. And I guess if it dies, you could just resummon it. Abathur's is one of those where it's specifically creating new playstyles. I think that's cool. Really incentivizing swarm hosts. Wouldn't have thought that, but that'll be neat. Karax, my boy Karax, combat unit cost reduced by 40%. That's the only advantage that matters in this whole list. Vorazun, I don't know. I think Vorazun is just so strong that you could add any advantage and disadvantage to her, and it's all going to kind of feel the same, right? It's just Shadow Fury. at the end of the day. I liked the top 2 of Zagaras. I wasn't thrilled with like the Zagara focused one, but the other 2 that are army focused are pretty cool. I can see like a very balanced advantage disadvantage there. Swans are all pretty cool too. I would love to increase the turret upgrades, considering his turret upgrades are already really good. So it'd be cool to use that on a defensive map. And this one would be interesting to try, if only because I've never been super reliant on the drill abilities, even though they're good. So it'd be kind of interesting to actually remove them to see if I, would eat those words or not. Orbital Strike, we'd have to see how that Unbound Fanatic actually works. And then the Kerrigan ones, I'm starting to, I've already forgotten what some of these are, but this was like the Hydra Ultralisk composition, different loadout for Kerrigan. And then this is like her abilities do some extra AoE. It's fine. Did I skip this one? I think I skipped this top one. Malignant Creep effectiveness increased by 100%. Nidus and Omega words are unavailable. I like this a lot. I mean, a lot of people, use those Omega networks a lot. I think they're very strong. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I'm not saying that they're not the optimal choice. But if you're into some good creep spread, and I tend to be when I'm playing Kerrigan, I think this would be great, especially if it affects your ally. That's a big, big bonus. And then just an incentive to actually make like a mixed air composition as Raynor, either with Afterburners or with Rebel Raider. Would be good stuff. And then biological combat units, blah. Normal Raynor, mega bunch of Marines. Cool. Well, we've gone through the whole list. This has been a long video. I hope that you found this informative. And again, thanks to the Chosen One for putting together the screenshot list. It's been very helpful for me to be able to browse through. But this is exciting. I'm looking forward to re-leveling all my commanders and then trying... I would immediately... They're all at level 15 already, so I would just prestige all of them, pick one of the new playstyles, and then re-level them to 15 with that specific talent applied. So you get a whole new leveling experience. And also, again, it makes your commanders a lot more viable on mutations when otherwise they might not have been. So you can use very specific prestige talents to make otherwise unused commanders actually viable and fun to use in a mutation. Again, there's always going to be an optimal choice, but I don't know. I don't necessarily always choose the optimal choice unless it seems like it's going to be a really hard mutation. So to have more options now, a lot, not just a few more options, but a ton more options. This is incredible. Just the amount of longevity this adds to the mode. I'm really excited to get into it. Alright, well, thanks for watching. Leave your thoughts below. This is a long video, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.